Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
And my name is Dyl, and today we are talking about one of the new Disney films to hit theaters this summer. But before we can dive into that, Matt, we have a very fun game coming up here on the channel here soon. So why don't you tell everyone about what that is?
Yes, we do. We play a game called Fantasy Filmball, and you can join in if you join our Discord in the description down below. The way that this game works is you are going to draft a team of 10 awards movies. Now, those movies are going to collect points over the next few months through their Metacritic score, their box office, as well as any awards, nominations, or wins that they earn. This is a great game if you are an awards junkie like Dylan and I, and you want to see these movies ride all the way to the Oscars, and join a league before August 15th. It's a really fun game, and we can't wait to see you there. And even if you don't want to play the game, you can still join our community. Come talk about movies, come talk about music, come talk about awards, come talk about all the things, and we can't wait to see you there.
Sometimes we get to movie reviews a little bit late, just like the movies that we are talking about here today, but if you're in the Discord, we talk about those as soon as we see them, as well as everyone else who's in there. It's a bunch of fun. You don't want to miss it. But let's not waste any time. Dive into our review today. So, like many, I've ridden Disney's Haunted Mansion, a handful of times. It's probably one of my favorite rides at Magic Kingdom. Matt, would this be one of your favorite rides, or would you pick something else?
I've been living with a Disney World fanatic for the past 3 to 4 years, so I've definitely fallen in love with a lot of the rides at Magic Kingdom, and I just went in December, and while I don't think I'd put Haunted Mansion like top 5, it's still a great ride. It's a lot of fun. I have a blast on it. I don't get all of the lore or the backstory that, like, my fiance can ride this and be like, oh, did you catch this story and this story? I'm like, no, I didn't get any of that. I nothing. But it's still a fun ride.
Yeah, I think it's a fun ride too. Would it be like my top tier? Who really knows? But when I heard they were adapting this into a new feature, starring one of my favorite actors being Lakeith Stanfield, I was super excited for this. And I was like, okay, I'm ready for this. It's one of the live action remakes I was more looking forward to, because I feel like they announced this so long ago. And on top of just adapting their princesses, they've been adapting a lot of their theme park attractions for movie ideas for a long time now, including the 2003 version of Haunted Mansion, which to me was a big miss. What about you? Were you more receptive to it, or did you also think it was a big X?
So actually, in November, while I was preparing to go to Disney World, I did a whole month of rewatching Disney movies, and specifically I wanted to watch the adaptations of the rides. So I actually revisited the Haunted Mansion pretty recently. It's not as bad as people said it was. It's really not. It's not the Haunted Mansion. It doesn't deliver on what the ride is. But the 2003 Eddie Murphy film it's a funny movie. It delivers on what you'd want from an Eddie Murphy family comedy in the year 2003. Does it deliver on what this movie could be? No, it doesn't. But it's still a lot of fun.
Yeah, I remember, I haven't watched the 2003 version in a long time, but I remember really liking how they adapted the house and how they showed the house in the movie. I just don't really recall really finding it very funny, but it's been 10 years. So you've seen it a lot sooner, so your reaction could be more similar to mine. But on the flip side of Haunted Mansion 03 being a miss for me, I would also say Jungle Cruise was kind of a miss for me a few years ago.
Yeah.
But the Pirates of the Caribbean movies were always, I think, top tier. Even though the later sequels were still kind of dumb fun, while they weren't 9s or 8s. They were still very enjoyable. So it's been a decade. We have a new adaptation here of Haunted Mansion, directed by Justin Simien. So before we dive into this one, I guess, Matt, how do you feel about all these live action remakes and adaptations of rides coming to the big screen?
Well, you were saying that you were really excited for a new Haunted Mansion movie. I kind of looked at it as why do they keep making these? It didn't work the first time. Why is it going to work this time? I don't know. I think it's always been a bit of a weird proposition to be hey, we're going to turn a ride that fundamentally doesn't really have a story into a movie. Jungle Cruise was a failure in that way. What were they trying to do? I don't know, but it didn't work. Pirates of the Caribbean was such a fluke, right? The Curse of the Black Pearl was just an amazing action-adventure movie, and it honestly... but that's a movie that doesn't feel like it's based on a ride. Right? It doesn't feel like they're relying on the ride for anything. And now when you go to the parks, you think that the ride is based on the movie, not that the movie's based on the ride. Haunted Mansion, I don't think we'll ever be able to escape that. Also, here's the thing that I've always felt about Haunted Mansion is it's a really hard sell to do a Disney horror movie. It's not a horror movie, but it's like it has all the trappings that you'd expect in a horror movie, but it's geared towards a family audience, but it's still not especially family friendly. That said, at one point, Guillermo del Toro said that his dream project was to make a Haunted Mansion adaptation.
That would have been cool.
That would have been wild. I don't know what that would have looked like, but I'm sure it would have been a lot different than what Disney would typically give us. Yeah, just a little bit different from what Disney would typically give us.
You know, I think it would be really interesting to give him the Tower of Terror movie and see if they just let him go full horror with it, what they could really, bring out of that. But today we are talking about the 2023 version of Haunted Mansion, and I thought it was pretty delightful, and it kind of nailed some of the aspects of the ride. As I mentioned before, I'm a big Lakeith Stanfield fan, and I thought he was great in the leading role of Ben, and I thought this whole ensemble really kind of nailed it from top to bottom. Rosario Dawson, I think, was very fun in her limited screen time. Owen Wilson had some pretty good laughs throughout. And even the meme man himself, Jared Leto, Dr. Michael Morbius, I enjoyed his Hatchbox Ghost. I like the makeup work they did to him. I guess, Matt, what were some of your thoughts about this cast here?
Well, I said before, I was pretty pleasantly surprised by the movie. It wasn't great by any means, but it was quite fun. It was good, and it had a lot of things that I think were pretty rewarding in it, specifically Lakeith Stanfield. His portrayal of grief, everything he was going through, he brought the heart to the movie. His performance really spoke to me in a way that kind of went beyond what I'd expect from like a Disney live-action adaptation of a ride. I really loved what he was doing in this role, and honestly, I think that it's some of the best work of the year, which is shocking to me, but he really moved me with his performance in this.
Yeah, I would have to backpack off of that. I think the highlight of this film is how it talks about grief, how someone deals with it, how someone interacts with it, and then how someone moves on from it. And while there's a few times I think they kind of derail from the concept when they try to like tie in like brand placements into the conversations that they're having, but I still think the central story that they're going for and how they're attacking it is not just a great metaphor, but also something that I feel like is very rewarding and can connect with a lot of people like it did with you, like it did with me, and I'm sure like it did with a lot of other people out there as well. Is there anything else you want to add to like this topic of grief? And to me, I think this is the highlight of Haunted Mansion.
Well, I don't think the movie's about moving past grief at all. I think it's about learning to live with grief and accepting that sometimes grief is a part of life, and that we have choices, and the choices are to let the grief define us, or let the grief be a layer and a texture to who we are. I thought that was powerful, and again, Lakeith Stanfield, I thought, really delivered on that. That said, I don't think I loved the rest of the cast, specifically the mother and son characters that, if we have grief as this kind of layer of the movie and a theme, those characters are also facing grief, but I never felt it from them. I never believed that they were going through that. It almost came as like a twist later on that they had also lost someone. But again, Lakeith Stanfield, he brings the heart to the movie, and that's what makes this a cut above Jungle Cruise, a cut above the previous Haunted Mansion movie. It really has that heart to it. That said, you mentioned the brand placements, and before we move on, I want to talk about how awful the goddamn product placement in this movie is. Like, it seems like every sentence they're being like, oh, I bought this from Walmart. Oh, I ordered this online on Amazon. Like, every other sentence, they're dropping a brand name.
Did you have a favorite or a least favorite brand tie-in? Because I think my favorite one has to be when they're driving in the car back to the Haunted Mansion and they got some Burger King with them. And they talk about, oh, it's not tots, it's jalapeno poppers.
Oh, God. It was all so bad. So bad. And, like, it did, again, I keep saying the emotional core of the movie is there, and none of this detracts from the emotional core. It's just annoying.
Mm-hmm.
It's annoying.
I get that, and I guess there are faults with this movie, which we'll dive into a little bit here later. But I think another really good aspect for this is its like production design of the Haunted Mansion itself.
Yeah.
I feel like it really sets the tone for like the eeriness and like the hauntiness of the place itself, and you feel like this house is alive in a sense. And while I don't think it really delivers on making it very scary, because as you mentioned, this is a movie for families, not for horror phenoms and stuff.
Scary.
I still think like the endless halls, the ceiling stretching, the gargoyles, and just the eeriness of it all really delivers. Is there any other like technical elements of this movie you thought were like on point, or do you think it kind of ends with production design?
To backpack off of what you were saying with the production design, a lot of that has to do with the visual effects. There's a lot of creative practicals that are being used here, a lot of very creative CGI, and just compositing in general. I really loved like you mentioned, the halls stretching, the sort of endless feeling of all of that. Honestly, the visual effects in this were quite good. They were quite well done. I'd also say I think that the cinematography was shockingly really nice to look at. Especially you look at like the previous Haunted Mansion movie, which just looks so plain, so bland. This one has some nice color grading to it. The lighting is very good. It captures that sort of dark, spooky feel, the kind of blue tone to it that's occasionally interrupted by the orange of lights. Overall, I think the biggest highlight here, especially because I went to see the movie with someone who is such a Disney World fanatic, someone who loves everything about this ride, who knows all of the details and Easter eggs. She was just so ecstatic, and she would like lean over and let me know about little hidden secrets in each scene, or the references to the ride and the deep lore that this ride somehow actually has.
I think that really added to my experience with watching this movie, because I know I came out a little bit more positive than you, and we are both a lot more positive than everyone else out there. So at least to you, we talked a little bit before about product placement and not really delivering on some scares, or maybe the tone was a little bit off. What do you think were some of the other little issues with this movie? Because obviously this is no perfect movie here.
Yeah, well, like I've said, I think that this is quite enjoyable. It delivers on the heart of what you would kind of want out of a movie like this, but the major downside to this movie, in my opinion, is the plot. And the plot being not the main story. I think that they did a good job with the story, with the themes, with building all of that, but the plot specifically in the sequence of events, there's so much back and forth. They're in the mansion, they're out of the mansion, they're in the mansion, they're out of the mansion, they leave, they come back, they leave, they come back, and it's always a back and forth, and it just honestly ends up feeling like the movie kind of goes on forever because of this. Like, there's so much going on, and it feels like they're waffling back and forth.
So, obviously, a lot of people are not huge fans of this movie, so I would assume for awards season, this is a zero across the board. Maybe a slight chance for a VFX shortlist, but probably not. Disney live-action movies usually don't make that anyway, and if they were, they have Little Mermaid this year. So, should he draft us for Fantasy Filmball? No, definitely not.
No.
Don't even have this on your board. But that does not mean that we both didn't, enjoy this, because I still think this is a very good tale of, like, resilience, self-discovery, like, confronting grief, as you were talking about, and it just sends a great message out there. So if you made it this far in the video, consider dropping a like, a subscription, a comment. Let us know how you feel about this movie, because as we said, the thoughts are all the way from positive to super negative. But make sure to come back next time, because we talk movie news almost daily on this channel. But until then, my name is Dyl,
and my name is Matt, and this is Fantasy Filmball.